Welcome to Don't Watch Qatar 2022, a series of articles and podcast episodes about the dilemma many football fans are facing right now, to watch or not to watch the upcoming World Cup. My name is Enzio Bakker, I'm a Dutch football fan, and I decided a couple of years ago that I'm not going to watch this year's World Cup. During this project I'll explain why by answering 8 questions every football fan should ask themselves. Today we'll focus on question number 3. Won't this World Cup lead to improvements in Qatar? This is one of the most important questions surrounding the upcoming World Cup. People who are trying to defend FIFA and Qatar have made claims about the tournament's potential for bringing about beautiful improvements. So, are they correct? The first thing that meets the eye is that those who make this claim don't seem to fully believe it themselves. Ronald de Boer, for example, said the Qataris improved their country because the footballing world asked them to. But in the same interview he says, if you go from camels to Ferraris all of a sudden, you're going to have accidents. Quite a generalizing thing to say about a country in which a lot of people probably own multiple Ferraris, but the point is clear. Progress can't happen quickly. In other words, we're going to have to accept a certain degree of human rights abuse. The idea of the World Cup heralding improvements needs to be at least slightly corrected. It heralds slow, tiny improvements. The idea of football being a progressive force also gets called into question by Bayern Munich legend Karl-Heinz Rummenigge in an interview with German broadcaster ZDF. After talking about the wonderful way in which football improved Qatar, he says a while later, "It's all too easy to say, here comes the great Bayern Munich, pointing the finger and saying, you need to adapt your human rights and workers' rights to conform to European norms overnight. I think it's being oversimplified. I think football is being forced into a situation where it's expected to improve the whole world." So, which is it? Is football going to turn Qatar into the promised land, or should we not expect too much? Apart from these apparent contradictions, the numbers paint a clear picture. At the time of The Guardian's first revelations in 2013, nearly 2 million people lived in Qatar, of which an impressive 90% were migrant workers, about 1.8 million people. Experts predicted at the time that 2 million more migrant workers would come to Qatar and about 4,000 deaths would occur at World Cup related construction projects. 4,000 deaths on a total of 3.8 million people. Then, in 2020, after all Qatar's so-called improvements, The Guardian crunched the numbers again. There were only 2 million migrant workers in the country, a lot less than expected, but an estimated 6,500 had died. It's simply not true that Mohammed bin Al-Thani's promised reforms have led to improved life expectancies of workers. On the contrary, it turned out worse than feared. To put it in the Boers' terms, the Qataris got off their camels and started walking backwards. So what happened with these promised changes to the Qatari system? Amnesty International's report from late 2021 is clear. The changes are mainly symbolic. In reality, almost everything has stayed the same. A good example is the law that prohibits the common practice of retaining employee passports so that they cannot leave the country. First, every employer is still allowed to take 5% of their workers' passports. Second, employees who want to leave need to inform their bosses 72 hours in advance. Amnesty has records of many employees who are quickly accused of theft or refusal to work, which is a crime in Qatar, shortly after giving notice, which still makes it impossible for them to leave the country. Third, the law prohibiting the detainment of workers is enforced only very sparingly. Because of this, while taking workers' passports has been illegal since 2015, Amnesty International, when they surveyed 105 workers, found out that 83% of these workers had their passport confiscated. Another apparent improvement is the possibility to change jobs. The government developed an online system in which workers can do this, but it's in Arabic, which makes it indecipherable for most workers. Also, the system requires you to enter a phone number registered to your name and to submit a copy of your passport. But, as we've seen, many migrants don't have their passports, and also most of them have a phone provided to them by their employer. The options to leave the country or change jobs are only theoretical options. In practice, they barely exist. Another big issue that persists is migrants not getting paid for their forced labor. In 2015, the government started inspecting companies, checking if they paid wages in time. But companies late on payment only face restricted access to government services and will be named and shamed. They don't have to worry about any legal repercussions. One thing that can happen is them being sued by employees at a workers' committee, another one of the recent novelties. Unfortunately, these processes are slow, and the overwhelming majority of cases is won by employers. And the most successful case Amnesty could find was one in which workers finally got their money after 2 years of legal battles. The country proudly presented a raise of minimum wage, but what good is this if your wages don't get paid? Also, we shouldn't be so naive to think that minor international pressure on the Al Thani regime has led to a significant change of heart concerning human rights. Even the bare minimum of change that Qatar implemented has been debated inside the country. In August 2020, the hashtag employers' rights became trending in Qatar because many employers didn't agree with the government's reforms, which they claimed would restrict their freedom. Subsequently, the Shura Council, a kind of legislative council, proposed drastic new restrictions to workers' rights. Coincidentally, the very next day, The Guardian published their story about the 7,500 worker deaths, after which the restrictions were called off, for now. But it's painfully clear how little the workers' rights are safeguarded. Another example of this came just recently in August. When a group of workers protested outside the Doha headquarters of their employer, 60 of them were arrested and put into cells without air conditioning, while temperatures reached 41 degrees Celsius. Allegedly, the police told the detainees that if they can strike in hot weather, they can also sleep without air conditioning. Then there's the role of football in all this. According to some, sport is a catalyst of change in the world. Amnesty International, however, states a lack of commitment from FIFA to guarantee the migrant workers' human rights are protected. They point to the problems concerning the construction of the Al Bayt Stadium. Workers reported to FIFA in July 2019 that they were still owed 7 months of wages, but FIFA only took action in May 2020, and they only did so after the story became public. Amnesty writes in its report from 2020, "The fact that FIFA was unaware of the plight of workers at a World Cup site for so long shows it is still failing to take human rights abuses linked to the World Cup seriously enough." The cause of FIFA's passivity might be their entirely different view of the relationship between football and politics. In 2018, for example, when diplomatic tensions caused Saudi clubs to refuse to play international matches in Iran, Gianni Infantino said, "It's very clear that politics should stay out of football and football should stay out of politics." Such an attitude doesn't compute with the idea of FIFA forcing Qatari authorities to improve working conditions for migrants. They can't claim football causes political changes on the one hand and say football and politics are entirely separate on the other hand. The actual relationship between FIFA and politics is much more complicated than either we're improving the world or we don't interfere in anything. More on this in episode 5. Wrapping all this up, we can see how the idea of this World Cup improving workers' rights in Qatar is wishful thinking at best, with no basis in reality. At worst, this idea is an attempt at whitewashing football's role in the human rights abuses. Anyway, whatever positive influence the Qatar World Cup might have, it pales in comparison to all the suffering caused by Qatar hosting this tournament. The hope for this World Cup to bring about much needed change in the Gulf state has turned out to be idle. It could still be possible, however, for this World Cup to have positive consequences after all. If all the negative attention brought upon Qatar because of this World Cup would make the country look bad on the international stage. This is why the next chapter will be all about the question, won't this World Cup backfire for Qatar because of all the bad publicity? To read more about these issues and to check the sources I use to piece all this together, visit our website don'twatchqatar2022.com. If you want to support us financially, please don't. We don't want to profit off this tournament. Instead, please donate to one of the organizations listed on our website. Also, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and TikTok. We'll keep you posted on the next episodes. Thanks for listening. This was Enzio Bakker from the Netherlands. I hope you'll join us again next time.